This week on the Wealthy Pilots podcast, estate planning, why we procrastinate and how to maybe avoid some of that. So let's get into that conversation this week with Scott Osborn. Here we go.
We've got some turbulence up ahead.
Hey everybody, welcome into the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with Scott and I. Fully into June. It's nice and hot outside, my friend. But hopefully you're doing well, looking dapper.
Well, finally, we're getting some warm weather around here in Toledo, Ohio. We've had a record cold and wet spring. So, it gets you questioning, why you live where you live sometimes. But we don't have a low cost of living for no reason. So
there you go. Well, hey, that factors into our conversation this week on estate planning, right? Cost of living sometimes goes into that and how you want to leave things and so on and so forth. So I want to talk about procrastination, right? So we all are guilty of it no matter what it is. Pulling that train out of the station sometimes is quite difficult to do, especially around estate planning, because I don't want to talk about when I'm going to die, or what's going to happen afterwards. So what's some thoughts? What do you want to get into this week here on this?
So I think, when it comes to estate planning, to me, I feel like it's always number 11 on my top 10 things to do this year, knowing that I'm only going to get the top 4 or 5 done.
Okay, it's fair.
It never really, it's always like in the back of people's mind that it's something they need to do. But it's never making the priority list of like, hey, we got to get this done.
Yeah.
Unless it's, sometimes you have certain triggers that will get you to think about like, hey, we need to get this done.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about some of those triggers, but before we get into that, I do want to share even just a recent story on this topic. So we, as you know, we have our calendar of topics that we always want to talk about. So we've had this plan, but since you and I last spoke, Mark, we had a really good friend of mine. His brother passed unexpectedly, 42 years old.
Oh man.
He had been divorced for a month.
Oh man.
He's got 2 boys, 5 and 7. And, the boys found dad in the bathroom. He had I think some sort of heart attack. They're still looking into it. And, no foul play, no suicide or anything like that, but it's just like one of those just terribly freak things. And, as they're digging into it, I was talking to my buddy. He's an attorney, so he's got a background in, some of he doesn't do estate planning, but he's got, plenty of knowledge in it. And he and I were chatting and he said, man, this is terrible. He's got nothing in place. Some basic life insurance. And as they start digging in, there's no plan for what to do with this house, no plan for what to do with the minor children. And candidly, even if all that was in place, so much of that would have changed post-divorce anyways. And so, where it's kind of now manifesting is that, okay, the court's looking into it and they're having to decide, okay, it looks like his dad is going to be the executor of the estate, but then there's all this nuance to the minor children going back to mom, and mom has a lot of her own issues. And, if you lean into the work that you never want to lean into, but if you lean into it, you can have a plan for, how things go for those you leave behind. And that's where one of the biggest things that kind of comes to the forefront of my mind with estate planning is that we're not the ones that have to deal with the wake of our lack of planning.
For sure.
We care about that have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that, it's super sad. I mean, the whole situation's super sad. But you want to take a situation like that and say, that's a really sad situation, but how do I make sure that my family is going to be protected? Yes, with adequate insurance, but setting the insurance side, like just what happens, like what is the plan when I die, and there's, a legal answer, but then there's also like you taking some time to understand what your intent is and then getting the legal documents to support that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the guys and gals that I talk to, with their background as, airline pilots, I mean, many of them already have a will in place. That's very common. But there's more to it than just, I have a will, right? I mean, the will
Yeah.
It's a letter instruction to the judge, basically, of here's what I want to have happen with my stuff.
Yeah, and a great way to remember for folks is a will just means you will go through probate too. So a lot of people sometimes think that that's not the case, but it is. It's just a letter of basic instructions. So if you want things to be private, you maybe want to be talking to an attorney about a trust potentially.
Well, and I think there's a lot of folks that think, hey, I don't need to worry about my estate plan until I'm getting closer to the point that I die. Well, if I knew when that was going to be, I could, make a lot of different life decisions differently. But the other part of that is, even if I'm assuming, hey, it's going to happen when I'm older, if it doesn't, what is going to happen to your minor children, and then you do have scenarios where like, well, what if mom and dad both die in a car accident, right? That's like the worst of the worst kind of scenario when we got minor kids. If you're going through the process of estate planning, it's not that hard to have a plan for that. If you don't have a plan for that, then the courts are going to figure out what happens to your kids.
Oh yeah. If you don't have a plan, the state has one for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And, even kind of speaking to that from like a personal perspective, I remember when we adopted the girls from Hungary, we were going through, this is a little off topic of estate planning, but it showed me a little bit behind the curtains of these governmental social services, right, how they're working.
Okay.
When we adopted Ellie, Catherine, and Nina from Hungary, and we're going through the process of bringing them home, we go and we're basically checking out of like the Hungarian government office, and they like erase these kids out of the social services in Hungary, and they assign them a new birth certificate. Their new birth certificate, actually, their place of birth shows wherever Andrea and I lived is what their place of birth was on their new birth certificate. So two of them have the same place, and then we were in a different town, different home for the third one, and that one's there. So I thought that was really interesting. But basically, they were showing us like, hey, your kids, these girls now they're on the United States of America's books effective like today. And so it was kind of insightful to me around, as it pertains, obviously they were abandoned and, in a foster care system, no formal parents until we adopted them. But the same is true for any, if something happened to Andrew and I now and we had minor kids, if I don't have a plan, then the state is going to step in and just figure out what's best for the kids. And they're going to look at the situation, and, my parents and Andrew's parents are going to fight about it and blah, blah, blah. And if we don't have a plan, the state decides for us.
And it's not always going to be the best, right? I mean, clearly, we've seen there's millions and millions of stories about, the state just does sometimes what's efficient, right? So having a good strategy in there, and you mentioned that sad story about, that you started there with, and, that's kind of somebody in that, was he between his 30s and 50s, I'm assuming?
He was 42.
42, you said, that's right. Yeah. So, kind of looking at some stats the way we were talking, and I've got a similar story, an adopted son of mine, he's not my actual adopted son, but he's like it. He's been in my life for like 20 years now, since he was a wee one. And his sister-in-law, one day, she's in their 20s, drops dead at the breakfast table with her three young kids. 20 years old, had a hemorrhage and died. Yeah. Right. So young adults often, Scott, think, I'm too young. I don't need this. Right. Which they absolutely did. Even people in their 30s to 50s sometimes, like the situation you just described, they feel like, my spouse will just get whatever and everything's groovy. Like and I'm going to live, I'm fine. So it's very hard to kind of wrap our minds around our possibly dying randomly, right? Yeah. Or stuff like that. And it's a lot of this stuff is pretty low hanging fruit. You could check off and make things a little easier, isn't it?
Yeah. If you look at some of the fundamentals, everybody should have a will. Absolutely. Just to let the judge know, like, hey, here's my general letter of instruction, right? To help your stuff not get stuck in probate. It's not going to keep it out of probate, but it'll at least help it not get stuck in probate. Right. And it can give that probate judge, some insight into what you're wanting to get done. But when we look at, somebody who's going through a little bit more advanced estate planning than the will, we're talking about getting something like a trust in place. Now, I'm not an estate attorney, but if you do just a little bit of research, we can basically know that the trust is going to give us a little bit of what I would call like we're able to rule from the grave a little bit, which means that after we pass, we can still be giving guidance. Now, when we look at our accounts that we have, maybe at a Fidelity or a Schwab, however we have our beneficiaries designated, that's bypassing the trust, that's bypassing probate. unless the beneficiary is the trust, right? So
Right.
investment accounts, Andrea is the primary beneficiary. The trust is the contingent beneficiary. And so if I die, the money goes to Andrea. If we both die in a car accident, God forbid, the money's going to the trust. And then the trust is going to be able to, dish out those assets to take care of the kids in accordance with the guidance that Andrea and I have put forth. But if you don't take the time to get that trust set up, that's not going to be an option. So, but again, you look at, I think, taking a step back and saying, like, when are good times and good triggers to look into updating my estate plan?
Okay.
If we walk through a couple of those, traveling abroad, you look at who we talk to a lot. We got a lot of travel abroaders here. So, when
especially
you
the
abroad,
world today. Yeah.
absolutely. So if you're a frequent traveler, you have potentially different legal and even just lifestyle risks, I'll say. So it's definitely good to have that estate plan in place for that aspect of it. If you look at marriage, divorce, birth of a child, buying a home, buying a rental property, those are all good things that, like, good life events that should cause, maybe not good life events in terms of like divorce or whatever, but
right.
If we look at life events that get us to pause and reflect and say, what's my current life situation? And if we have any of those events going on, it's a good time to take a look at our estate plan and say, all right, now if I die, what happens? Do I have enough insurance to take care of my spouse and my kids? Have I made that decision on my own, or have I, made it with some planning? Have I made it with my spouse in the conversation? And then ultimately, if something is going to happen to both of us, do we have a good plan that it's going to be hard on those we leave behind no matter what, hopefully.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if we've done a good job as, husband, father, wife, mother, et cetera, it's going to be hard on those we leave behind.
Yeah.
But we want to make it as simple as possible for them to, get access to the assets in the way that we desire to. If we have minor children, to make sure that we've been explicitly clear with what the plan is there. And by the way, the very last part of this estate planning that I'll say is we have to communicate it as well. I mean,
thank you. I was going to say that as like a big part of this, you can stay, because people are always like, well, my kids won't fight over my stuff when we pass and blah, blah. Money makes people funny. And anyone who thinks their kids are not going to fight, you're fooling yourselves. You're being willfully naive, right?
Head in the sand for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Do communication, do as much of that as you can ahead of time, and stave off, hopefully, some of that stuff. Because, man, I've talked to advisors like yourself all the time for years, Scott, and people are, they're like, you'd be surprised how many families get ripped apart by this stuff.
Absolutely. It's sad for sure, but there is, especially if there's anything out of the quote unquote ordinary, let's say you got 2 kids and the assets were going to get split 50-50. If you're like, well, Mark got his doctorate degree and we paid for all that, and Scott, dropped out of school in junior high.
Scott, you bad boy, you.
Yeah. So we're going to give Scott 60% because we paid for all that schooling for Mark.
Yeah.
We're going to give Mark 40%, but we're not going to talk to him about it.
Right.
I'm telling you, Mark and Scott, those brothers are not talking to each other ever again.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to be fine. They're not going to care. Yeah.
No, they're going to care. Yeah.
They're going to care. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And right, wrong, or indifferent, that's the legacy that's getting left behind. That's what's left behind.
Yeah, and that's a great point. That's a great way of breaking that down too, right?
Well, and I think it's one of those things that, like, if you're going to have a scenario like that, maybe that is fair and equitable, and maybe it's the right thing to do. But if you don't
divulge it, yeah.
If you're really trying to lead your family too, I mean, you got to be able to sit down and have that mature conversation with your growing children too, and say, "Hey, here's what we're doing. Here's why."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
do it over a family dinner, do a special family dinner, whatever it is, man. But you got to do it. And as the patriarch or the matriarch or whatever it might be, you got to drop the hammer sometimes. And we all know that as parents, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, this is how it's going to be. And because I don't want you guys, going at it when we're gone. I've got a sibling in that situation. I've got my brother has half siblings that don't speak to him anymore because his dad left them some stuff whenever he passed. And he didn't for the other two because they were so problematic in his life. I guess he viewed it as punishment. I don't really know, but my brother's like, hey, I didn't expect it, so I'm sorry. It is what it is, and they won't talk to him now. So.
Well, I mean, and again, you look at just how much family dynamics have changed now.
Oh,
so let's say, I mean, like most of the folks that we're bringing in. Beyond the 401k stuff, if we're like really looking into the retirement plan, they're over 50, right? So the folks that are like over 50, on average, 50% like have like just a will, no trust, no like advanced estate planning or anything like that. So, you got to be willing to like get that in place and then have some of those discussions with your adult children because you're really setting them up to have some of that infighting. And again, I think it's worthwhile to look at the number of unique families, I'll say. Okay. And when I say unique, it's over 50%. So the unique family now would be more of like the traditional family, like the husband and wife have been married the whole time and they got their 2.1 kids and a white picket fence. And that's been the homogenous unit for all the time. Or for their whole relationship. That now statistically has turned into the minority where we have a significant amount of second marriages, step kids, half kids,
blended families,
half siblings. Sorry. They're still whole kids.
They're still a whole person.
And so I think when you look at those dynamics, it can get a little bit more emotional. It can get a little bit more complicated. And I think because it starts to get emotional and complicated, it gets very easy to procrastinate on it. And again, the what we're leaving in the wake of our passing is a mess, and that is hurtful to people that we leave behind. Maybe some people don't care because, they're gone. I don't know. But to me, I don't want that to be what people remember about me.
Even if you walk the line of being a hardliner and you kind of have that attitude, sometimes when you say that out publicly, I think most people are not that way, right? When you pass, you want to make things as easy on whomever it was that you loved after you're gone, even if it's your dog, I mean, you've seen some of those crazy stories about ultra rich people that left a whole bunch of money to, was it Lena Horne, I think, or something like that, left like $5 million to her dog and someone to take care of it, so crazy stuff. But hey, if it's your money, do what you want, right? But just get it done, right? That's the end of that's the point. So, all right. Well, final thoughts. I mean, I think we got it covered. I think at the end of the day, look, no matter whether you're 18 to 20 or in your 20s and you think it's not for you, or you're in your 30s or 40s and you think it's not for you and you're thinking, I don't need to worry about this till I'm over 50, just get it done. Cause you never know when a random bust is going to happen. I mean, just get it done. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's like anything else. I mean, we want to expect, the worst and we want to plan, for the worst, but we want to hope for the best. Right. So I hope, we both, Andrew and I both pass on the same day, like the Notebook. We're both 95, holding hands in bed. We go to sleep and don't wake up.
Super sweet.
Probably not reality.
Reality.
Have a plan for the worst and then hope for the best. But get that plan done too. And I think too, it's good to just look at it as part of that broader financial planning work that we got to engage in. Doesn't take a lot of time, but get clear on a couple things that are important to you. Have a professional draft of the documents. And again, most of our airlines, I mean, they can get that done for very, very cheap. If they sign up for the legal plan through their employer or whatever, it's very cheap, like pennies on the dollar. So, it's just a little bit of time, get it done. And then as you go through some of these life changes we talked about, dust it off, make any updates you need. And it's very cheap and it's a light lift to get the updates done. And then, you have that work done for the rest of your life. And then it's just, refining it. But I think the starting is the hardest part. So just start.
Hey, and if you need to get started, we got a great way for you to do that. Molly, tell them about that.
Hey everyone, real quick, if you haven't grabbed Scott's Financial Flight Control Toolkit yet, now is the time. This is packed with tons of helpful resources and tools like this, Scott's book, The Dichotomy of Wealth, which is a pilot's guide to maximizing wealth and cash flow in retirement. You also get access to some great guides like this one, Advice Matters, which breaks down 4 key ways a good financial advisor can help you boost your returns over time. And guides like this one on the pitfalls of emotions when it comes to investing, and this one on the HCM byline investment strategy, and more. So if you'd like your very own financial flight control toolkit, just click the link in today's show description, and Scott and the team will be happy to get one sent your way at absolutely no cost to you.
All right, Scott, thanks for hanging out with me and chatting on estate planning. Not always the sexiest of topics, but again, to our point conversation today, an important topic, one you got to deal with. If you need some help, check the links below. Get in touch. Can't talk today. Get in touch with Scott. Get yourself onto the calendar at retireairlines.com. That's retireairlines.com. And don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, of course. Hit that subscribe button, thumbs up, and notification bell so you catch new episodes when they come out. Supports the channel. It really helps a lot. We certainly appreciate it. And you catch new, nuggets of information from Scott and I along the way. So we'll see you next time here on the Wealthy Pilots Podcast with Scott Osborn. Thanks, buddy.
See ya.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.